I want you to listen, and all of our viewers to listen, first of all, to some of the comments President Trump has made over the past couple of years or so about the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin. Listen to this.
Donald Trump is a friend of Putin. Well, actually, Putin did call me a genius, and he said I'm the future of the Republican Party.
I think Putin's been a very strong leader for Russia. Putin is the leader of Russia. Russia's a strong country. If he says great things about me, I'm going to say great things about him. I've already said he is really very much of a leader.
Very smart cookie, much smarter, much more cunning than our president.
Putin is a nicer person than I am.
Putin's fine. He's fine. We're all fine with people.
Wouldn't it be nice if we actually got along, as an example, with Russia? I'm all for it. Putin's a killer. A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
I really can't say right now. As far as I'm concerned, a competitor. A competitor.
Last clip from today, calling him a competitor rather than a friend or foe. Gloria, if the president doesn't see Putin as a foe, what can we expect from his meeting next Monday in Helsinki with the Russian leader?
Well, it's hard to know, Wolf. I think that's what the NATO allies are worried about. I think that's what a lot of conservatives are worried about, Wolf. The Heritage Foundation tweeted a note to the president saying Russia is an aggressor, Ukraine is a victim, and pointing out to the president that he ought to keep that in mind. And these are from people who are conservative, anti-Putin, and want to remind the president that just because he likes authoritarians doesn't mean that he ought to try and cut deals with them without the rest of his team around him. I think one concern, quite honestly, is Trump going to want to meet one-on-one with Vladimir Putin? Will he have his advisors with him? Will we have transcription of the meeting? I mean, these are questions that all remain to be answered.
Yeah, and they're important questions. Mark Preston, there's a pattern we've seen of the president praising adversaries while alienating key allies, whether Europe or Canada. How do you explain that?
All right. Well, the short answer is that there is no explanation, because it absolutely makes no sense. Not only do we have President Trump criticizing our NATO allies, attacking the EU, just criticizing anybody who has been an erstwhile, loyal, dependent ally of the United States. But at the same time, then he turns and then he says all these great things, as we just showed there a moment ago, of him praising Putin. So that in itself is perplexing, and you have to wonder, what is really the long-term lasting damage? We're living in a moment right now. We're a society that oftentimes can't look that far ahead, and you got to wonder what the lasting problems are going to be because of this. And Wolf, just imagine this. Could you imagine if an American citizen died here in the U.S. because of a Russian nerve agent, and the Prime Minister of the U.K., Theresa May, went and sat down and had a meeting with him? Could you imagine that? Our number one ally deciding to do that? That in itself is just insane.
Sabrina Siddiqui, the president continues to take issue with the NATO allies, saying the U.S. is being treated very, very unfairly. It has been treated unfairly, he says, for decades. What are the implications of these comments on the eve of this NATO summit?
Well, the president has latched on to the issue of commitment to defense spending, and it's fair to say the Trump administration is not the first to complain that some NATO countries are not paying their fair share. But what is distinct about President Trump is he is actually willing to weaponize his position in a way that threatens to upend America's relationships with some of its closest and most long-standing allies. And this fixation on the 2% number, that NATO countries should pay at least 2% of their gross domestic product toward the military. Military planners actually tell you that there's no magic number. And so for the president to singularly focus on that issue, it not only threatens to alienate close U.S. partners when it comes to national security, but it also distracts from the very substantive concerns facing NATO when it comes to discussion about reforms that do need to be made on the national security front.
Susan Hennessy, on another sensitive subject, there's a growing chorus of people, as you know, on the left who are arguing that if confirmed, President Trump's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh should recuse himself from decisions related to the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. What's the basis of that argument, and do you believe there's any chance Kavanaugh would sit those decisions out?
I think the basis of that argument is a perception that Donald Trump selected Kavanaugh because of prior statements that Kavanaugh has made that Trump might think are that he would rule favorably to him in this Russia investigation. I actually think those law review articles are being misread. Kavanaugh probably takes positions that are adverse to the president. But the question is whether or not in confirmation hearings, if there is an appearance that the president has made this selection in order to benefit himself on these questions, will Kavanaugh commit to essentially recusing himself in order to remove the appearance? I think it's incredibly unlikely that that happens. The recusal rules are not binding on the Supreme Court. That's in part because unlike the lower courts, there's not another justice that can step in and rule on a particular case. So this might be an issue that Senate Democrats decide to push very hard on, but it's unlikely that Kavanaugh is going to agree.
Yeah, important point. Guys, I want you to stand by. We're getting some new details right now about Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's recent meeting with North Korean officials in Pyongyang. Our senior diplomatic correspondent, Michelle Kaczynski, has learned the talks went even worse than things appeared. What are your sources, Michelle, telling you?
Hi, Wolf. Well, this was according to a source with familiarity with the discussion, saying that the sense in the White House is that this trip of Pompeo back to North Korea to meet with, at the very least, Kim Jong-un's right-hand guy went about as badly as it could have gone. That ultimately, the North Korean side seemed to be, in the words of this source, messing around and not really serious at that point about moving things forward. Also, Pompeo was apparently promised at some point another meeting with Kim Jong-un himself. And that never happened. So that sent a very bad message that things are at the very least not going the way the U.S. would like them to go. Pompeo also had gifts to bring to Kim Jong-un that he wanted to hand deliver. One was, yes, this CD of Elton John's famous song, Rocket Man, and there was some other gift. Because he never got the meeting with Kim Jong-un, he wasn't able to give those gifts, so he just took them with him onward on his trip. And we heard the president today confirm that that CD was part of this little package that he was going to bring. So where does that come from? According to a source who has familiarity with these matters, when President Trump met with Kim Jong-un at their summit, President Trump, according to the source, asked Kim Jong-un, "Do you know where I got the nickname for you, Little Rocket Man?" That Kim Jong-un said no, he did not. President Trump said it was from the Elton John song, asked him had he ever heard of it. That Kim Jong-un said no, he in fact had never heard of Elton John. The source said Trump then told him, well, he's really good. I'm going to get you the song. I'll send it to you. And that Trump also asked Kim Jong-un, according to the source, did you mind when I called you Little Rocket Man? And we're told that Kim Jong-un said no, he did not mind. Where does this all leave us? Well, clearly Pompeo did not get any furthering that they would have liked to see in maybe a timeline of denuclearization, and there's still a pretty big gap in perception there.
Yeah, it's underscored by the fact that Kim Jong-un snubbed the visiting Secretary of State, even refused to meet with him on his third visit to Pyongyang. Michelle Kaczynski, thanks very much. Excellent reporting. Also breaking right now, President Trump arriving just a little while ago in Belgium for a very important NATO summit. As he left the White House and via Twitter during his flight across the Atlantic, the president complained that NATO allies aren't paying their fair share. NATO leaders have made it clear they aren't very happy about the president's criticism, but it's getting an enthusiastic reception. Guess where? In Russia. Let's go there. Our senior international correspondent, Fred Pleitgen, is in Moscow for us. Fred, tell us more about what the Russians are saying about this.
Yeah, certainly the Russians not unhappy, Wolf, and even the U.S.'s permanent representative to NATO acknowledging that what is going on currently in NATO, the rift in that alliance, is, quote, music to Vladimir Putin's ear. Now, she also says that she believes that President Trump actually values the NATO alliance and that he's going to be very tough on Vladimir Putin when they meet in Helsinki at the beginning of next week. But of course, America's allies aren't so sure, and the Russians certainly are hoping that there's going to be a good chemistry between the two men. Here's what we heard.
President Trump in Europe for 3 tough meetings with American allies and adversaries. Clear on which meeting he's most comfortable with.
I have NATO,
I have the UK, which is in somewhat...
YouTube viewers, if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm trying to adjust the brightness on my screen. Thank you.
President Trump has ripped into America's NATO partners, saying they don't spend enough on defense, while the U.S. shoulders the bulk of the alliance's costs. European politicians calling on Trump not to forget who his friends are.
Dear America, appreciate your allies. After all, you don't have that many. Dear Mr. President, please remember about this tomorrow when we meet at the NATO summit.
NATO's loss might be the Kremlin's gain. Vladimir Putin's spokesman saying the Russians have nothing to do with the turmoil between America and its allies, but clearly not unhappy about the weakened alliance.
This is an alliance that was constructed to serve the purpose of confrontation, and our attitude is based on this belief. What the alliance is doing long term, I mean them getting closer to our border and expanding military infrastructure towards our borders, just proves the essence of the alliance.
Russian pundits and politicians feel President Trump might be moving America away from its European allies and closer to Russia. State TV even joking that the Brits may have staged the recent poisoning of two people with Novichok, the same military-grade nerve agent used to poison a former Russian spy in England earlier this year to derail the upcoming Trump-Putin summit.
There is a vast field for conspiracy theories, given that Trump is coming to the UK. And with the NATO summit coming up, they're gearing up to place blame on us and prepare Trump ahead of his meeting with Putin.
The U.S.'s allies will be closely watching both the NATO summit and the Trump-Putin meeting, looking to see whether America's president really will have an easier time with the Russian leader than with long-standing partners.
And Wolf, we've been following some of the past couple of days, and the Kremlin really has been very careful with the statements that it has been giving, saying, look, we don't want to expect too much from the summit right now. It's good that these two men are talking to one another. However, if you listen to pundits here in Russia, if you listen to some politicians as well, they do believe that this could be the stepping stone for a very good relationship between Vladimir Putin and President Trump, Wolf.
Yeah, lots at stake in that meeting on Monday. Fred, thank you. Fred Pleitgen in Moscow. Coming up, Democrats accuse President Trump of picking up Brett Kavanaugh for the U.S. Supreme Court in order to foil Robert Mueller's investigation. Should Kavanaugh take part if Mueller brings a case that makes it all the way to the highest court? And we're also awaiting word on how many immigrant parents and their very small children are actually being reunited before the government misses its deadline today. I'll speak live with the Health and Human Services Secretary, Alex Azar.